Hello. Today we're going to start in on another section of geometry, the next section in our book, which is going to go over measuring angles and angle types. This section is actually going to take us 2 days to go through. We're going to kind of do the introduction to angles today and then go a little more in depth tomorrow with what we call the angle addition postulate. So today, first thing we do is just kind of talk about the formal definition of an angle. So an angle is a figure made up of two rays with a common endpoint called a vertex. So with an angle, you're going to see a point where you have multiple rays, so maybe 2, maybe 3, 4, whatever, rays coming off of that one point, creating multiple angles like we see down below here. So we notice that we have a common endpoint where both rays here are meeting at point B. So we have ray BA along the top side and ray BC along the bottom side. So the sides of our angles are under the names of those rays. So BA and BC. The vertex is probably the most important part of the angle. That's going to be the thing that we look at the most. That's the thing we work with the most. It's how we use certain naming possibilities with it. So the vertex is that common endpoint where the two rays come together and meet. So in this case, our vertex would be point B. So that's going to be an extremely important thing to be able to recognize and identify in a given picture as we get more and more complicated and add more and more rays to our problems here. Now, as far as naming angles, there are 3 possible ways to name an angle. So first, we can name the angle using 3 letters. This is probably the most common and the one that you can use no matter what, as long as they give you points on the angle. So if we're using 3 letters, the vertex must be the middle letter. That's extremely important to remember. So as I'm looking at this picture, my vertex is, again, extremely important to identify. So it's where the 2 rays meet. So B is my vertex. When I want to name an angle, I need the angle symbol. And then I'm going to pick the 3 points, but I have to do it in such a way that B happens in the middle. So typically what I do is I just pick a point to start at. So I start at point A. I travel to point B, and then I travel out to point C. That's going to be the direction my angle goes. So angle A, B, C. Now I wouldn't have to go that direction, so I could have just as easily started at point C, travel to B, and then out to A. So all I'm doing here on the naming is just following the path of the angle. So I could also do C, B, A. As long as that vertex is in the middle, you're okay with those 3 letters. Now we have a second option here, which is using 1 letter. If the angle, or in the problem, if there's only one single angle at a given point, so notice in this picture, there's only one angle where point B is here, where the vertex is, then I can go ahead and use the vertex on its own as the name of the angle. So I can just call this angle B. Note, I still have that angle symbol, and then I'm just using the 1 vertex letter to name the entire angle. So if I'm looking at this picture and I say angle B, there's no question that we're talking about that angle there. My third option is using a number. Now this is only applicable if they provide us with a number to begin with. So we can't just make up a number on our own, they have to give it to us in the problem. So if we note here, in the picture, we have a 1 right there tucked in the corner. That's telling us that can be used as the name of that angle. So I can call it angle 1, remember the symbol, remember the number. And that will be the same name or same angle in the picture. So 4 different possibilities for this one angle in this picture. Now, one thing to note with this number option, if I'm given a picture where they give me angles, and like we said, we're going to get a little more complicated as we go, but let's say they give me an angle here, and then they give me the measure of that angle, 60 degrees. I cannot call this angle 60. That's not going to be how it works. It's got to be just a number associated with the name, not the actual measure of the angle. So just be aware of that. For an example here, we have the following diagram. Now note, we stepped it up a little bit complication-wise, so it's not just the 3 points. Now we have a couple different angles we have to account for. So the one thing that you have to be careful with here, there are actually 3 different angles to work with in this particular picture. The obvious ones would be this first angle here that I'm highlighting in green, and this one here that I'm highlighting in purple. Those are the two obvious ones that most kids can see, and that's the ones that they're able to identify. But there is a third angle kind of hidden in here, which I'm going to highlight in blue, and that's this big overall angle from X over to Z. So there are actually three angles that we have to account for here as we go through and name. So it says name all the angles. So for the green angle, I have quite a few options here. So the green angle, we can use the three letters. As long as W, because that's the vertex, as long as W is in the middle, I can use those three letters in either order. So angle XWY or angle YWX. Either one would work. Also, note that they gave me a number inside the angle here. So inside this green angle, I could use that number and call this angle 2. As far as the purple angle, again, I have a couple options. I can use the 3 points as long as W is in the middle. So for my purple angle here, I can do angle YWZ or angle ZWY.
Oh, you're on the phone.
I can also use the letter, or the number in the side, 3, and I can name it angle 3. So 3 points, vertex in the middle, or the number inside the angle there. And then for the last one, we can do the 3 letters, angle XWZ, or angle ZWX. Now in this case, there's no number associated with this big overall angle, so I can't use a number. Also, because there are 3 different angles, we had the green, the purple, and now the blue angle, at W, I cannot, for any of these angles, call them angle W. That one letter name is reserved only for the times where we have just the one single angle at the point. So if this had just been like this, I could call that angle W, but as soon as I add another angle to the mix, this is no longer an option. So you cannot use it if there's multiple angles at that point. As far as types of angles, this should be pretty straightforward. These are things that you guys have already worked with before. The acute angle is any angle less than 90 degrees. So anything up to 90 degrees would be considered acute. When you hit 90 degrees exactly, you hit your right angle. Now with these, one of the important things to note is in the picture, they're going to put this little box here. That box is what indicates whether an angle is a right angle or not by what it looks like. So I could have an angle that's drawn and looks exactly like a right angle. But if I don't have that box, I cannot assume that that's 90 degrees. So no box means no 90 degrees. I have to have that box in there for us to be able to say it's a right angle. An obtuse angle is anything bigger than 90 but less than 180. So anything between 90 and 180 is going to be obtuse. And then the last one was one you may not have seen before, but it's called a straight angle. So basically a straight line, and what's important to note here is that a straight line has a measure of 180 degrees. And this is going to be an extremely important concept, especially with the next lesson we talk about and then throughout the course of the year. Any straight line that you see in a picture must be 180 degrees total. As far as measuring and classifying angles, we're going to talk very briefly about measuring. This is only going to be kind of a little minor topic that we discuss, but classifying is going to be an important part of it. So once I know how big an angle is, what type of angle is it? So in a problem like this, I look at what they're asking me to find. So now notice we have the angle symbol, this lowercase m out front. Whenever you see a problem where it has like m angle symbol, this is talking about the measure of the angle. So it wants to know how big is that actual angle. So if we look at our picture here, we have angle MRP. So we trace the letters, just go in the exact order that they're telling you in the problem. We're looking for the measure of this angle right here. So what we need to do here is follow it from the horizontal if we can, and we're just going to kind of come around our protractor and use the measurements that it gives me. Now note, at this measurement here, it gives me 2 different numbers, 40 and 140. Now here we have to use some common sense. This angle is a big obtuse angle, meaning it has to be bigger than 90 degrees. So if I'm looking at these 2 options here, 40 would not make any sense in this problem. So I'm going to say that this angle is 140 degrees. and that makes it obtuse. Now, the other thing I could do is, starting at the beginning, I could go and count by tens all the way around my figure until I get to the end. So I could be going 10, 20, 30, 40, and so on until I get to 140 all the way around. So if you want to, you can count around the outside. Otherwise, you can use the numbers on the place and use those to determine values. For my next angle, angle NRM, so here if I go N to R to M, so now we're talking about this green highlighted angle here. So if I look at that one, now this one doesn't start at the horizontal. So this is one where it might be more beneficial to have me just count from one point to the next. So from N, I go 10, 20, 30, 40, 50. So NRM has a measure of 50 degrees, which is an acute angle. And then our last one, angle NRP, so if we start at N, come down to R, and over to P here, again, since we're at the horizontal, we could just use the numbers. And in this case, both numbers are the same anyway, so it doesn't matter. It's going to be 90 degrees. Or again, if I want, I can count from one to the next. So 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, 90. So I get 90 degrees, which makes this a right angle. So one of the things you're going to be asked to do on the homework is find the angle measure using the protractor, and then what type of angle is it. So if you're using the numbers on the protractor, just be careful. Make sure you pick the one that makes sense. Big angles are going to use the bigger numbers, smaller angles the smaller numbers. Otherwise, you can always count from one point to the next, which is the way I would typically do it. Last thing, congruent angles. When we have angles that are exactly the same measure, so that's the important thing here, same exact measure, we call those angles congruent. So in a picture, the way they're going to do that is with these little arc symbols. When they're telling you that two angles are the same, they're going to use those little arc symbols, and that could be with any sort of picture. So maybe we see a picture like this, and then we see these little symbols right here. That means these are congruent angles right here. Now, the key thing here, the angle is congruent to another angle. So angle A, the physical angle A, is congruent to the physical angle B. If we're talking about the measures, though, so if we're talking about the measure of angle A and the measure of angle B, that means numbers. So for instance, if angle A had a measure of 30, that means angle B also has an angle of 30. Those are equal to each other. So when you have the little m in there, the measure of the angle is equal to the measure of the angle. If you're talking about the actual angle itself, just angle A and angle B, then you use the congruent symbol, so it's important to note the difference there. So the measures are equal, the angles are congruent. Okay, and you'll note those with those little arc symbols in the picture. From there, you should be able to complete the worksheet that we gave you in class or that you can access on Google Classroom. If you have questions on anything, again, make sure you ask in class, make sure you email one of your teachers, and try to get those things figured out. You can also access the answer keys once those are posted and try to help you figure out which of the problems you're working with here. So good luck with that, and ask if you have any questions.